Hey, folks. This sponsor, justcoffee.coop, has been sponsoring, well, not just this show, but even the show that Marin and I did before this at Air America called Break Room Live. Just Coffee has been a sponsor of mine in one form or another for over 16 years. They used to listen to Marin, to Break Room Live with Mark Marin and I, and they did a Break Room Live coffee, then they did a WTF coffee, and now they do a Majority Report blend. Did you know that Just Coffee has a tagline of justice from the grounds up? That means they ensure that all creatures from being to being are treated with respect. The earth is taken care of by the farmer is paid fairly by Just Coffee, and the beans are roasted to order, not sitting around for months on a shelf. They have a feature called a coffee tracker. You can find this on their website. On the bottom of every bag is a 5-digit number. Hop on their site, plug in that number, and you can see exactly who grew your coffee and how much they were paid for it. It's like going to the farmer's market, knowing the farmer you're buying from. That level of transparency is going above and beyond what retailers are required to do. And those types of clean and transparent actions are just one of the things that I love about Just Coffee. Check it out. There it is. There's the code too, right there on the back. They started almost 25 years ago. It's their 25th anniversary. We're going to be doing ads from them, I think, over the course of the next week or two. And they started by helping the Zapatistas in Chiapas, Mexico, get their coffee out. And they've grown since then. And check it out. But the coffee is also fantastic. They got a bunch of different blends. JustCoffee.coop. Use the code MR25. You'll get 25% off of all their coffee. Now's a great time to check it out. Now for the show.
The Majority Report with Sam Seder.
The destiny of America is always safer in the hands of the people than in the conference rooms of any elite.
Sam Seder.
They are unanimous in their hate for me, and I welcome their hatred.
We must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex.
The Majority Report with Sam Seder.
And I get the feeling you've been cheated.
It is Monday, August 19th, 2024. My name is Sam Seder. This is the 5-time award-winning Majority Report. We are broadcasting live steps from the industrially ravaged Gowanus Canal, the heartland of America, downtown Brooklyn, USA. On the program today, Richard Slotkin, cultural critic and historian, professor of English and American Studies at Wesleyan University, author of his most recent, A Great Disorder, National Myth and the Battle for America. Also on the program today, DNC Day 1. It launches tonight, ladies and gentlemen. Meanwhile, thousands gather in Chicago to protest the Biden administration Gaza policy and push Harris to cut arms to Israel. This, meanwhile, on the day of, or the launching of the convention, Harris gains ground in national polls and in swing state polls, puts the Sun Belt firmly back in play. Across town, Donald Trump in a meltdown, well, metaphorical town. In a meltdown mode, brings Tulsi Gabbard in for policy prep, or what we call debate prep. Iran holds off on retaliating against the Israeli attacks, allowing for a last-ditch effort for Gaza ceasefire talks to succeed. Meanwhile, a federal judge blocks the big three entertainment companies' sports venture, citing antitrust. 17,000 AT&T workers across multiple southeastern states strike. Supreme Court, for the time being, allows 10 red states to continue to assault transgender rights. COVID infections on the rise across the country, 10 states in particular. All this and more on today's Majority Report. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. Thanks for joining us. It is
Fun Day Monday.
Fun Day Monday. Have you read my email? Says for the longest time, I thought it was called Just Coffee because it was just coffee and nothing else. You know what? I will cop to for the first couple of years also thinking that till I went out there, I realized, oh, just coffee, as in like justice.
I thought that too. Well,
yeah.
I'm drinking just coffee right now, the MR blend. I've been having it for the past few days, even though, I'm usually lazy and I don't like to grind my beans. I'll just keep the pre-ground in the freezer.
You can get them ground too.
Oh, you can? All right.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I got
They'll
this
grind your
stuff
beans
for
for you.
free from the office, but I will going forward because it's quite good.
Also meant to rest in peace, Phil Donahue, who just passed away. Phil Donahue, like I think to today's ears, he would just seem really sort of like mealy-mouthed. And even then, he was, because he would do like a daytime drama show at one point as well, sort of vacillate between news and that. But when he was on MSNBC back when it was a right-wing outfit in the early aughts, he was the only person who would bring anti-war people on in the run-up to the Iraq War, and he was fired because of it. He's also the guy in the national media who I think, pretty close, gave Bernie Sanders his first interview when he was elected mayor in Burlington, Vermont. And this was in the, I want to say in the 80s or early 90s. And, bringing him on is like, he's a socialist mayor. And, but, that's what you had to do back then to bring it on and give a less than hostile, sort of positive interview for somebody at that time. So rest in peace for Phil Donahue. I mean, he was literally the only news person in the country on cable and mass media. I mean, obviously Amy Goodman at that time too was doing this, who in the run up to the Iraq War was letting dissenting voices on. And the was it Robert Wright who was the CEO of General Electric, which is one of the biggest arms manufacturers in the country. Just basically got enraged every time he would say anything critical of the war or the run up to the war. So just wanted to mention that. Meanwhile, let's turn our eyes to the Democratic National Convention, which begins tonight in Chicago. Tonight, President Joe Biden, First Lady Jill Biden, former Secretary of State and Trump popular vote beater Hillary Clinton will be on the docket, as will AOC.
That's
so
good.
This is basically,
but yes,
this is the night where I think both conventions do this. This is the night where they hope you tune in on Wednesday.
Right. Like we love
or
AOC, but the rest of that lineup of Hillary and Biden and Jill Biden is like they want people to have better things to do on Monday night.
Well, I mean, it's to set like where we came from, and then but AOC sort of makes it hopefully where we're going. I think Emma and I are going to be doing some sort of loosey-goosey coverage tonight. We'll see. So stay by your app and your Twitter to get info on that. Tomorrow night, former President Barack Obama and the second gentleman, would-be first gentleman, Doug Emhoff, will be joining. Will be speaking. Wednesday, Tim Walz, former President Bill Clinton, former House Speaker Nancy Pelosi. Thursday, Kamala Harris accepts the Democratic presidential nomination as the final step of the overthrow of Joe Biden. She's already been nominated officially, but they'll go through it. We can talk more about the lineup tonight, but outside the DNC, today is supposedly going to be the biggest protest that we're going to see on the Democrats' Gaza policy. John Fetterman notwithstanding, who apparently has a very different opinion. We'll talk about that more in the fun half. Here is a welcome party, a delegate welcome party at the Navy Pier in Chicago, and a pro-Palestinian, or as I like to say, anti-genocide protester takes the stage and was sort of uninvited.
Y'all can do better than that. Mike Damani!
150,000 people are dead! You are funding a genocide! The Harris-backed administration keeps funding money to Israel!
So there you have it. There's also going to be a much bigger protest. Here is a video posted yesterday by uncommitted co-founder Layla Alabed announcing that the DNC is going to hold a panel on Palestinian human rights for the first time.
Hi everyone, my name is Layla Alabed and I'm here in Chicago at the Uncommitted National Movement headquarters preparing for the Democratic National Convention, and I have historical news for you. What makes this historic is for the first time in our country's history and the history of the Democratic National Convention is that we will have a panel discussing Palestinian human rights as an official part of the DNC program. This panel is going to be featuring Palestinian voices, including my own, as well as Palestinian Hala Hijazi. This panel is also going to include the voice of Dr. Tanya Haj Hassan, who is a renowned pediatric intensive care physician that has been serving the men, women, and children in Gaza who have been experiencing the very real human impact of our U.S. policy decisions. We thank the DNC for working with us on creating this historical panel while we continue focusing on policy change. Hi, everyone.
So they didn't get the speaking slot, most likely. I mean, it hasn't been officially announced yet, but that seems quite clear. From the Democrats' perspective, they probably don't want to highlight a weakness at their own convention, but I'm excited to see the continued pressure throughout these next 4 days. Because there's over 30 uncommitted delegates that are going to be making their presence known. And I would not be shocked if there's enormous disruptions, as there should be when Biden speaks tonight as well.
I think the other thing too that this is an indication of, and somebody just asked on the do you think that the protesters storming the stage? I don't know if I would say storming the stage, but jumping up on stage, that one protester and taking the mic is helpful. I'm not sure what helpful in, it depends on what your standards are and what you're trying to achieve as to what they're helpful. From my perspective, I think it is helpful insofar as one, putting aside for a moment the moral aspects of this. In terms of just sheer electoral aspects, the polling is pretty clear that if Harris took a position that she would condition military aid in some fashion or another, it would help her with voters in swing states. And doing stuff like grabbing the mic or protesting at the DNC, I don't think is going to hurt Democratic prospects. But it does indicate to Harris that, look, you're moving into September is different than June and July and August, because college students get back to college. This was one of the epicenters, obviously, of the protests We've seen the president from Columbia University essentially lose her job by the way that she reacted to the protests. We've seen Shapiro, I don't know if it was the only reason or even, well, it was definitely part of the reason, was rejected as VP because of the way that he reacted to protesters. And, Biden couldn't go to college campuses and Harris couldn't go to college campuses. This is going to be a big deal for them in the fall because, young people are going to be voting and this is going to be the message. And so Harris can come out and, at the very least, there was a great op-ed by Peter Beinart in the Times. It's already clear that she's not going to support an embargo, but what she can support is the application of the law. And Beinart makes the point. She's a prosecutor. This is what her whole thing is law and order. There is a book, a law that's been on the books for, 20, 30 years, the Leahy Law after Patrick Leahy. And it's quite clear the Israelis are in violation of that law. And she needs to come out and say, I will support this law and I will support the application of this law.
Yeah.
And
which would basically make sure that weapons don't go to Israel because they're in violation of, U.S. law or humanitarian law. That's what the Leahy Law is supposed to trigger. And I just want to that IMer, do you think it's helpful to grab the mic? Like, protests are not there essentially to persuade people on the spot. They're there to make people in power increasingly uncomfortable. And if these protests continue and disruptions continue, that makes Harris and the Democrats uncomfortable. And that's really what needs to be, I think, emphasized here.
For Palestine and for Wisconsin and Michigan.
Yeah. Right. It's electorally smart. And apparently she met with the mayor of Dearborn in a private meeting that was not disclosed to the public until it was strategically done so and through a leak to the Associated Press. There's a lot that needs to happen, but somebody coming up and disrupting there is just there not to make an argument that's going to win over somebody really. It's just there to make the people in power uncomfortable. That's how pressure works. So.
All right, we're going to take a quick break, or I should say a couple of words from our sponsors, and then we'll be talking to Professor Richard Slotkin, cultural critic, historian, professor of English and American Studies at Wesleyan University, author of A Great Disorder, National Myth, and a Battle for America. First, a couple of words from our sponsors. It's not hard to find people writing and reading about the benefits of fasting. Benefits include things like weight loss, but also mental and physical performance, gut health. Problem is people worry about the whole not eating part. That's exactly why Prolon was created. I want to introduce Prolon. It's a revolutionary plant-based nutrition program that nourishes the body while making cells believe they're fasting. Researched and developed for decades at the University of Southern California Longevity Institute, it's backed by leading U.S. medical centers. Prolon helps promote healthy blood sugar, helps support cardiovascular health, helps reduce abdominal fat, helps with longevity. But Prolon is not a diet. Prolon is science. It is science based on Nobel Prize-winning discoveries in medicine. And this all starts with Prolon's 5-day program, snacks, soups, beverages, all designed to keep your body in a fasting state. And what happens by the time you get to day 5, your cells have been tricked that they're in a fasting state, even though you actually are eating. And you're not eating the normal amount, obviously. And they begin a more regenerative process. I mean, you can read about this in terms of the stages of what happens when you're fasting. It really is unlike anything you've ever experienced. I did it, I guess, 6 or 7 months ago. I was able to do the show, which shocked me. I thought I was going to be a huge wreck. It's not super easy, but it wasn't super hard either. I've never been so excited to drink a soup before or to have a cracker, but you also really do appreciate the food. I mean, but it's fasting, but with food. Right now, Prolon is offering the majority report 15% off, or the listeners, I should say, 15% off their 5-day nutrition program. Go to prolonlife.com/majority. That's PROLON life.com/majority for this special offer. Also, today's sponsor, a great gift for anybody at any time. There's 365 days in a year. That means you are bound to need to buy somebody a birthday present soon. Why kill yourself? Simplify the process with an Aura digital picture frame. It's ranked #1 digital picture frame by Wirecutter. Aura frames are easy to set up, they're easy to update, and they're super easy to enjoy. Plus, Aura frames can be preloaded with photos and messages, so it doesn't matter who you're giving the gift to. You can have it be their gift as soon as they take it out of the box. You can literally preload the pictures onto the frame without opening the box, without even seeing the box. When you order it, makes it so easy for the tech intimidated. Every Aura frame comes with unlimited storage, so you can preload the frame with as many of those photos as you want. All you need is the free Aura app and a Wi-Fi connection. Right now, Aura is having the very first friends and family sale. Exclusive offer for our listeners, limited time only, $35 off their best-selling frame by visiting auraframes.com using the promo code majority at checkout. That's AURA frames.com, promo code majority. Best offer of the season. Do it now. Terms and conditions apply. All right, quick break, and we'll be right back with Richard Slotkin. We are back. Sam Seder, Emma Vigland on the Majority Report. I want to welcome to the program Richard Slotkin, cultural critic, historian, professor of English and American Studies at Wesleyan University, which is sort of where I wanted to go to school, but I didn't get it. Author of A Great Disorder, National Myth, and the Battle for America. Richard, welcome to the program.
Thank you very much. Glad to be here.
Let's talk about the... Well, let's first start with the idea of myth.
Yes.
Generically speaking, what does a national myth, or a sub-national myth, is part of the story here. What does that mean? Why do they exist?
Well, basically, a national myth is the stories that have been developed over time to explain the origins and the historical movement, historical direction of America, of any nation state, since most of them do have national myths. It's a use of history to place people in a ongoing frame of collective action, collective belonging.
Does it come from a certain insecurity on some level? Because there's a quality of like backfilling and rationalizing.
Well, yeah,
historical things. Like,
just to step back for a second, the national myths really arise from crises in the development of a society, of a nation state. So when you have a crisis like the Revolutionary War, the Civil War, it forces people to think, what is the society really all about? And so a story forms around that situation, which then is told and retold and elaborated and explained, and above all is used as an analogy for interpreting something that's happening in the present. Now that's where the notion of insecurity comes in, that you resort to your myths, you need your myths when you're in some kind of crisis. So you look for some kind of analogy to explain where you are. Example I like to use is Pearl Harbor, that when the Twin Towers were hit on 9/11, the first analogy that people brought up was Pearl Harbor. Well, Pearl Harbor is a story. A story is a myth. And once you know that you're in the framework of using Pearl Harbor as an analogy for your crisis, you know that it's a serious crisis, and you also know what you have to do about it, which is to say, go to war.
Well, I mean, but the implication of a myth too is that part of it's not true, right? I mean that if there was an event that we all as a society experienced that was exclusively positive, I don't know if that's such a thing as possible, but let's say it was just exclusively positive. Do you need a myth around it, or is it like, you don't? Well, you need a myth. It's people are disposed to tell stories, to explain things, and the stories that make up a national myth at the core, they have something that is true in the sense of factual. There was, in fact, an American Revolution. We did have a Western frontier. We did have a Civil War. We did have what I call the Good War. We had World War II that transformed the way America relates to the world. These are true events. The use that you make of those events when you interpret it, use them to interpret a present crisis, that is like a fiction. That is because 9/11 wasn't Pearl Harbor. Pearl Harbor is Pearl Harbor. 9/11 is 9/11. And that's where the fictional element comes in. But because there's a core of truth to it, it's a very credible fiction.
Well, it's also used, I think, I guess I could pose this as a question for you, Richard. Are myths there to serve as power or to justify what the government wants to do in certain moments, to mythologize the past, to justify actions in the present?
Absolutely. That is, it is there. It does. It's not there for that purpose, but it does serve that purpose. And according to one of the theories of nation-state formation, national myths were developed by the political classes that organized national government. So it is related. It is useful to those in power. But the story itself is the property of everyone who belongs to the culture. So, for example, you have the use of the Civil War in a crisis like the Charlottesville demonstrations. And you have one side using the lost cause version, the Southern version of the Civil War, waving the Confederate flag. You have the other side invoking Abraham Lincoln and the war for the Union. The myth is a cultural property that can be used by any group. But I guess the core of what you're saying and what I'd like to do is it's political at its core, whether it's being used by protesters and rebels or it's being used by the government. It's political at its core.
All right, let's get into the specific myths that you do talk about. The first is the myth of the frontier.
Right.
Walk us through what that myth is, and why it was developed.
Okay, that's the first American myth, and it develops out of the fact that we are a settler state. The society begins as European colonies who grow and expand through the wilderness over a course of about 300 years. So you have a 300-year story of westward expansion that is the core of the myth of the frontier. Now, in that story of expansion, there are two elements. One is an economic element, and that is the idea that America grows fantastically prosperous by exploiting new natural resources, and that the profits from that aren't simply small, but they're windfall profits. You go from being a colony of Great Britain to being the most powerful nation on the face of the earth in the space of less than 100 years. That's phenomenal growth. The second element in frontier myth is what I call savage war. And that is that to get the frontier, you have to displace the indigenous peoples. So at the core of this American idea of us as a westward expanding nation is an idea of race warfare. And that the primary distinction between that is at the core of American nationality is the distinction between white settlers and the non-white indigenous. That's the core of that myth.
And it occurs to me too that what it also does is it defines frontier from a specific perspective.
Oh yeah.
Right? Like
sure.
Like the frontier, it wasn't the frontier for the indigenous people. It was home. And like, what does that by defining the frontier that way, does that in some way sort of like diminish or essentially I want to say whitewash, but it really sort of like almost it could complete erasure of that sort of like contradiction that exists there?
It certainly takes the settler point of view, and let's call it the orthodox version of the myth is that version. Cowboys good, Indians bad. But the other side of it is, remember, we're dealing with stories, right? And the frontier myth brings the indigenous peoples into the American story, at first as an opponent, but then what I want to say, as an alternative. If you think about the romances of Fenimore Cooper, if you think of some of the recent films about Westerns that take the Native American point of view, it's available through the myth as an alternative to the way that we developed. And you can see as things go forward, when you question the growth economy and when you question white supremacy, the Native American becomes a very important symbol of resistance, balance rather than growth, and what I want to say, racial reciprocity rather than white supremacy. See, the power of myth partly relies in its simplicity, but its enduring power comes from its complexity. There's a contradiction in there, and that's what gives it its appeal and its power.
And so what is its utility? I mean, I can, even today, I can see how it's like exploited to aggrandize, entrepreneurs, let's say. I mean, like they're, what is it? Come in and destroy everything and, break things as to sort of like recreate a new frontier or something.
Right.
But what's been the utility of that through the years?
And mainly what you just said, that is mainly it has rationalized the development of a corporate economy that's in which growth, which is to say profit, is the all important thing. There are alternative elements within the myth, but the dominant strain is certainly what I just said.
That's fascinating, and it allows for also to sort of say like, and growth is in part, you're appropriating or extracting, or someone pays a price, but that's just part of the myth.
Yeah, one of the other things that's erased in the frontier myth is labor. The notion of profiting from, you think about it, the great thing would be like an oil bonanza or the fracking bonanza. It's a resource bonanza. But you don't think about the labor that goes into developing it and the rights of the workers who are helping you exploit the resource. The other classic example is slavery in the South, where the southern frontier is a slave labor frontier, but the frontier myth discounts that.
Let's talk also about the I guess of the four big myths. You talk about the myth of the founding.
Right. Yeah, and that is the idea that the United States as a nation was formed by this group of extraordinarily wise and virtuous white men who developed a set of ideas and a set of laws that are perfect for the creation of a democratic nation state. Declaration of Independence is the principles: all men created equal, government by consent of the governed, and the Constitution is the legal regime, balance, checks and balances, and the supremacy of law. We invoke that so often. Every time the Supreme Court issues a decision, especially when you're dealing with the originalists, they're invoking a story or a myth of the founding that assigns it extraordinary moral and legal authority. In the book, the thing that the current thing that I focus on most is gun rights, which is the gun rights movement, which has rooted itself in a version of a particular interpretation of the Second Amendment and mythologized that version so that it becomes a license to do just about anything you want, including arming yourself to overthrow the government.
And it's fascinating. There's almost like a 200 year span in which it's sort of like it reaches it makes its real move on some level. It's like, like one of those Bruce Lee kidney punches. It happens, and then 3 weeks later, your kidney fails or something like that. But how does the within the context of the founding, the sort of like general founding fathers myth, reconcile the difference between these two documents, right? Like the Declaration of Independence is a revolutionary document,
right?
Attacking the establishment. The Constitution is, in many respects, the creation of a new establishment,
right?
Like, how does that? And this is this happens with any revolutionary government. Yes. How do they all of a sudden justify having a government when we just got through saying like there's a lot of problems with the government?
The beauty of the myth of the founding is precisely the contradiction you just pointed to, which is to say you can use it to rationalize a rebellion, and you can use it to rationalize suppressing the rebellion. And again, myth arises from a crisis. A crisis implies a contradiction, a choice in the frontier between living like an Indian and living like a settler, a choice between revolution and order. And you can't resolve those contradictions. They're just there. The myth, as it's told, as it's used, balances it one way or balances it another.
Let's move to the myth of the Civil War. There was really a couple that came out of the Civil War, and maybe more than any of these myths, it has been. It's really these myths have really had an ongoing revision. I mean, these are still in play.
Yes, yeah, all of them are still in play. The Civil War. You've got the three versions. You've got the Union version or the Liberation version. Save the Union, liberate the slaves. Abraham Lincoln is the hero. You've got what I called the White Reunion. It was just a war between white brothers, North and South. They reconciled, they recognized each other's bravery, and forget about the black people. And then the third one is the Lost Cause, which is that the South was right, and that violence is justified to either defend white supremacy, which is to say to secede from the Union, or to restore white supremacy after Reconstruction is instituted. And these are really powerful and have ongoing through the society since the Civil War.
What are the circumstances when those get invoked? I guess, or how do they animate what we see today? I mean, maybe we should talk about the Good War, and then we'll talk about how all of these myths is sort of like impact today.
But the thing about the Good War, based on World War II, and really it really contains the New Deal, but it really applies New Deal principles to the Second World War. And it's the only one of the myths that is not white-centered, because the myth envisions America not as a white man's society, but as a multi-ethnic platoon, and indeed a multiracial platoon that unite, in which the differences, the diverse population unites to fight a war of liberation against racist powers. And I guess to connect it back to the Civil War, you asked when the Civil War is invoked. It's invoked when the primary question is, what role does race play in defining what America is and who Americans are? So that you got, excuse me, between like 1865 and 1925, you had a kind of shift from the possibility of a multiracial democracy, Reconstruction, to the rejection of that, and the acceptance, North and South, that white supremacy was necessary to be reestablished in the South. But this is also the age of massive immigration. And one of the things that the Civil War myth gets applied to is defining the difference between the existing white population, mainly Northern European, and the new immigrant white population, East European, Southern European, but also Asian. And there's a movement towards what I call ethno-nationalism in the turn of the century period that the Civil War, and particularly the Lost Cause myth, plays a big role. Now, the Good War rises in direct contradiction to that ethno-nationalist tendency. And the reason that it happens is that you simply cannot fight a 20th century war with by excluding minorities.
By only having a white army.
That's right. You can't do it. It cannot be done. You need the soldiers, and you need the financial support of the communities. I did a book called Lost Battalions about the First World War, and if you look at that period, in the space of about a year, the government goes from saying you can't trust any of these immigrants to saying, oh, America is not a racial society. It's a multi-ethnic society. It's anyone who believes in American principles can be an American, and it doesn't last. There's a snapback, but that's a sign of things to come. That when the bigger test of the World War II comes, they go back to that and really makes it between 1940 and 1970 a huge transformation occurs.
And having grown up in the era of like those type of war movies, which were so platoon focused. I mean, obviously there's Platoon, but like all of them have like, and you know, Spielberg is the perfect example of like, if you want somebody who is sort of fully embraced a myth and regurgitating it back to Americans, you know, Saving Private Ryan, like you can just go right down the line. Like, you know, I know what the casting office looked like. We're going to need one guy who's going to play Italian. We're going to need one guy who's looking Irish. We're going to need one African-American. We're going to need one, you know, this is the way that it's going to work. And everybody's going to be called some variant of their, hey, he's Philly and he's, you know, whatever it is.
Yeah. Interestingly, there were no African-Americans in Saving Private Ryan.
Oh, geez.
In the Platoon. No. But your slip is really critical because the original Platoon movies made during World War II, the two big ones, Bataan and Sahara, both have black guys in the platoon at a time when the U.S. Army was segregated. Hollywood is projecting an image of an idealized country that doesn't exist. Well, and also, selling it as the war. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I'm curious too how America's role in fighting the Nazis also plays into that myth, right? Of the United States as kind of a beacon of multiculturalism versus the Nazis exterminating the Jews and many other minorities, LGBTQ people as well. Like, you know, we, I think in the period since then have, because of the growth that happened after World War II, mythologized our role in it and say, like, not talked about how the Soviet Union lost 20 million people fighting the Nazis, for example. Yeah.
Yeah, that's true. And also not facing up to the fact that the army was segregated, that Jews and blacks were discriminated against in the service, blacks even worse than in World War I, actually. Blacks had a harder time getting into combat units in World War II than in World War I. Jews and blacks were routinely denied medals that they had earned in combat. So it's not real. It is a fiction, but it's very powerful fiction. And one of the things that I try to do is that once you've got this paradigm, you can. It's like a tracer. It's like banding the leg of a bird. You can follow the platoon from 1940 through 2002. And one of the things you see, the Spielberg example, I think is an excellent example, is a kind of reversion to a more segregated view, a nostalgia in Spielberg, I see, for a whiter world. In the other movie that I deal with in the book a lot is Black Hawk Down, where you have a black versus white is the story of that movie, and the only black soldier in the platoon, only one black soldier, breaks down at one point. He fails to shoot a black woman who's charging the position. And the white guy, she's got a gun or a grenade, I forget what it is. And so the white troops have to shoot her. That is within the framework of the story. We can inflect it to reflect the ideological drift of our times. And I see that drift as a drift towards MAGA.
We should say that was about in Mogadishu. The movie took place there. Was that incident true?
Oh yeah, that's based on a real incident. And
no. I mean that the black soldier could not shoot. No,
totally made up.
And that's the same dynamic too in Saving Private Ryan, where there's a guy who can't shoot the German prisoner, and it comes back to haunt them in some way.
Right.
So what was, all right, so let's move to the sort of the third part of the book, because, Barack Obama is a big turning point, but it's funny, like just when we were talking about the ethno-nationalism that was deployed against Southern Europeans in the first part of the 20th century, we're 36 hours or 24 hours away from J.D. Vance talking about how, just as an example, when ethnics get together in enclaves, you get crime.
Right.
Like he's talking about gangs of New York.
That's right.
Literally just sort of, I guess, to just sort of prove your point on how these sort of myths are deployed.
Yeah.
But what was that drift about? Because in the wake of World War II, we have this myth of the platoon, which implies that like everybody's, we're all Americans and we're all on board. And even through the Reagan years, I just saw a clip of Reagan saying like, America's the only place where you can come from anywhere and become an American. You can't do that. You can't go to Japan and become a Japanese person, and you can't go to France and become French. What happens over that time? Because there's a certain durability, as you're right, like it gets combined with the New Deal, and there's a certain durability to that through at least, the mid 60s. Well, we have this great compression where there's literally less income inequality than any other period in our country's history. Right. Where does this drift? Where does it go? Is it a certain insecurity that is associated with white people becoming supposedly not the majority, the so-called majority? Is it the loss of jobs that comes with like sort of, globalism? What begins to sort of like put us into this new, what you call MAGA era?
Yeah, that's a really complicated question. Let me take it from a mythological point of view. let's just assume, for the sake of the discussion, that this liberal social order was connected with the myth of the good war. So if you abuse the myth of the good war, if you get us into bad wars, you discredit not only the warfighting part of it, you discredit everything that the warfighting part brought with it. And I think that's one of the things that happened, that Vietnam really did a job on this country. And the attempts in the 90s of the Bush administration, the two Bush administrations really, to recover from what they called Vietnam syndrome, got us into wars that turned out to be bad wars, pointless wars, costly wars, and wars that, at least in the case of Iraq, were based on falsehood. It was charitably bad intelligence, but perhaps false intelligence. So the idea that fool me once, shame on me; fool me twice, fool me three times, get me into three bad wars, and maybe I think that that we shouldn't get into wars at all. And so you get the part of MAGA, which has been characterized as isolationist, goes with that. Now, I think that there is also, in addition to that, a cultural reaction against the racial liberalism and the sexual liberalism that we associate with the 1960s, 1970s. That there's a reaction against that. It coalesces around when Obama is president, but it's definitely present in the society before that. You see that in Reagan, in the Reagan years. You see it most emphatically in Pat Buchanan's declaration of culture war in the 1992 presidential primary campaign. And that really has become the focus of the cultural agenda of the MAGA movement, is the reaction against those the racial and gender liberation. Now, the racial part is a concern about a loss of social power by whites. And the gender and sexual part is about the loss of moral authority, the right to say what is good and what is bad, what is permitted and what is not permitted. If you lose that, that's a real loss. If you thought you had that authority and it's been taken away from you, that is a real loss. That's going to hit you. And that's, I think, why we're experiencing the power of that snapback against those liberating movements.
Longtime listeners of this program will remember back in 2016, 2017, there was an ongoing argument on this program about that loss of social relevance, and known as the zero-sum wars here on our program. But the idea, I mean, I would explain it as like when I was a kid growing up in the 70s and the 80s, there was nothing I could see in our culture that was not essentially centering me as a white kid. Like the commercials were focused on my mother, but my mother doing stuff for me or future me as dad.
Yes.
The TV shows, whatever it was, they were all from essentially either my perspective as a kid or my perspective as I grow through the years, but nobody else's.
Right.
And that changes, and it creates a certain anxiety, I guess, on some level.
And exploited by the Breitbarts of the world, right? Where they meld the kind of cultural anxiety and that what Sam is describing there, and put it into a political context of culture, politics being downstream from culture too. That backlash to Hollywood and to art or popular culture moving past what you describe, Richard.
Yes. Well, we're getting here. You think about, we're talking about mass media and the cultural function of mass media, which is to give us an image of ourselves. When the media change that image in a radical way, it makes a real difference. I'm thinking about when I was in graduate school in the early '60s, I remember when a black person came on in an advertisement, we would call, my wife and I would call each other and from the other room, come and look and see, because it was such an extraordinary thing to occur. It's not at all extraordinary now. It's the norm. You can even see interracial couples normalized as the people who buy rugs, the people who have homeowners insurance. And that to people who are, I would say, any older than 40, there's a big difference there. That's really and truly changed. And you feel it.
Well, let's talk about, I mean, as on it's the first day of the DNC it begins today. What are the competing myths that we see between red and blue, as you write about? Because you write essentially that the conservatives, broadly speaking, have been far better in deploying myths in the context of politics than progressives or liberals, I guess, as we, delineate that for us. And has that changed at various times?
Yeah, at the moment, MAGA has really, at this point, I think, two myths that they feature most prominently. One is the lost cause, that they're going to restore a lost social and cultural order, and the prosperity that presumably went with it. It carries with it a commitment to the frontier, the values of the frontier, and things like that. But it's the scenario that is the narrative that they're living is the lost cause, struggling to restore an order that liberals have overthrown. And the second piece of their puzzle, intimately connected with that, is the founding Second Amendment myth, that in order to do that, you need to be armed. You have to be able to arm yourself, at least to threaten violence, in order to carry out your program, and you are entitled to that by the Constitution as well as by the Declaration of Independence. And those are very clear stories. It's a very clear scene. You could make a movie out of that. You can call it Gone with the Wind. If you look at the mythological or the historical reference of the Democrats at this point, I really see two, one of which is the New Deal, and the other, to a certain extent, the Good War because of Ukraine. And the third one is the Civil Rights Movement. Now, it's a curious fact that the New Deal, which was an utterly transformative period in American political history, is not the center of its own mythology. There is no myth of the New Deal. You couldn't name 3 movies that deal with labor organizing in the 1930s, or with any of Roosevelt's infrastructure projects. I can think of one. Remember, I saw one movie about the TVA starring Montgomery Clift, I think. It's just not a story. It's subsumed in the World War II story. And to the extent that Ukraine is central to the Democrats, yeah, there's still a good war story. But the New Deal is really critical. And Biden really made that current. He really brought that back into the discourse in a way that it was never under Obama and never under Clinton. They didn't like the New Deal. They were more into neoliberalism, that is the corporate growth as the key to, was that the rising tide lifts all boats.
Right.
Which is a nice way to say trickle down economics. And the third one, the Civil Rights Movement, it's a myth in the sense that if I say Civil Rights Movement, you got Martin Luther King in front of the Lincoln Memorial, and we're home. And of course, you've got the Civil War myth there with Lincoln behind King. But it did not become, in my sense of the term, a national myth that is connected to the politics of the nation state. It became the story of individual groups seeking their right by following the script, the Martin Luther King script. So it became a myth of identity politics. And what Obama really started to do, and Biden and Harris are doing, I think, is to nationalize that myth along with the New Deal. I'm talking here about an imaginative use of historical analogies by political leaders to give a sense of context to the movement that they're leading. Whether they become myths or not is not for us to say. They either do or they don't. The public either says, that's a history I want to be a part of. As as my grandfather wanted to be a part of the myth of the frontier. This is a history I want to be a part of.
Are there things you're seeing in Harris's language that are at least sort of like attempting to pull into those less, I guess, discreetly defined myths that the Democrats or the center left have embodied? I mean, I'm over, I'm projecting a little bit on this, but the Harris and Walz have both used like freedom as a thing, which is not a typical. The last time you really heard freedom associated with a Democratic politician, it seems to me, was either freedom from government, maybe under like Bill Clinton, or Roosevelt's Four Freedoms, where you can employ that sort of like a narrative of freedom from want, freedom from freedom to follow religion, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, I think that's implicit in a way in what Harris is doing, but it hasn't been said yet.
Right.
What I'm listening for is, first of all, to what extent the policies reflect the kinds of things you were just talking about, but also the framing, the story that frames it. What do we bring in to give context to that word freedom? Second Amendment is freedom. Is that where we're going with this? If not, we got to hear it. I haven't heard it yet.
They're talking about basically
bodily
abortion
autonomy.
Yeah, bodily autonomy. Yeah, but again, freedom from want, freedom from fear. Those are bigger. Those are more totalizing. And my point would be, they're Rooseveltian. Right. They're New Dealian. They're invoking. They're putting you in this historical frame rather than that historical frame. And I think that's an important thing to do. I don't know how it will affect the election. God knows what affects elections at this point. But I think that in the long term for the culture, that's an important thing to do. And one of the things that Biden in his campaign did do, and which I talk about in the book, is he framed his policy statements. He did at Gettysburg. And that was his civil rights liberation, connecting it to Abraham Lincoln and Gettysburg and Civil War, the liberating Civil War. And then he did a speech at Warm Springs, Georgia, which was his New Deal speech, connecting to Warm Springs, which is so associated with FDR. So he did that. He made those moves. He didn't follow up on it to my satisfaction. But it was a move. It was made. It was put into the discourse, and I'm looking to see what Harris and Walz do in that regard.
Is it possible to, if as somebody in power or seeking power, adequately mythologize this struggle of, say, the civil rights movement? Because, when we're talking about how that has come into cultural consciousness, Reagan was the president that made MLK Day a national holiday. And in fact, a lot of people just think he was about love and good feelings as opposed to the struggle. When we're talking about popular culture, I think about Mississippi burning and how that was the portrayal of the FBI was the ones who they really were the liberators for Black people in this country. We still have a really long way to go, I think, in terms of adequately talking about the blood that was spilled and the struggle of of what it means to actually fight for equality, as opposed to saying, hug thy neighbor. The freedom, I think, rhetoric is better, but is it even possible for a politician to encompass that?
I hope so. I think there were some attempts that were made over the last couple of years around the death of John Lewis and the recall of the Edmund Pettus Bridge, the demonstrations in Birmingham, the controversy, excuse me, the discussions around the voting rights, the failed Voting Rights Act, brought up specifically the notion of struggle in connection with civil rights, and connected it to an issue that affects everyone, which is to say voting rights. So I think gestures have been made in that direction. No one storytelling incident or episode makes a myth. It's repetition. It's the fact that people come back to it and do it again. Oh, that's so good. I have to repeat that. I have to find another version of that. I have to find a sequel. I have to find a prequel that brings the story into currency and use. And again, I see a tendency towards it, but let's see what use is actually made of it.
We will indeed have an opportunity to see if they're going to deploy something that dramatic, at least in terms of rhetoric. This week, Richard Slotkin, cultural critic, historian, professor of English and American Studies at Wesleyan University. His latest, A Great Disorder, National Myth and the Battle for America. We will put a link to that at majority.fm. Thank you so much for your time today. I really appreciate it.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me. Good talking with you.
You too. Bye-bye.
Bye.
All right, folks. We're going to head to the fun half of the program. Now that we have we are now armed with our sort of ability to watch for narratives in the course of the next 4 nights. Em and I, or at the very least, we will endeavor to cover tonight. I'm not super psyched, I'm going to be honest with you, to hear from Hillary Clinton, or Bill Clinton, for that matter.
Are you going to be drinking?
Oh yeah.
I can't. I gotta wait till Wednesday, Thursday. I can't do every night. I'll
be starting the show at 12:20.
It would affect my physical appearance. People would be like, Jesus Christ.
I'll go slow. I'll go slow tonight. And folks, don't forget, it's your support that makes this show possible. Your support can take many, many forms. And send our clips to your friends, post it on whether you see clips of ours on TikTok, follow us on TikTok, follow us on Instagram and Facebook, although they don't like political content, but you can see what we post there if you follow us there. You can spread around our clips on YouTube or on Twitch. On Twitch, you can give us your Prime subscription for the month. It doesn't cost you anything. You can give us a good review on iTunes, or you can go above and beyond. Become a sustaining member of this program at jointhemajorityreport.com. When you do, you not only get the free show free of commercials, you get to IM us in the fun half. You get to hear the fun half. And you allow this show to survive and thrive. So check it out. Also, don't forget, big sale going on at justcoffee.coop. Fair trade coffee.
Upside down.
Hot chocolate. Thank you. Use the coupon code. Usually you get majority, you get 10% off? But right now, if you use the code MR25, you will get MR, the number 2 and 5. You will get 25% off. Now is a great time to try a bunch of different blends, and they have single origin, I should also say. Somebody reminded me the other day. Coffees over at, and you can get them ground. You don't have to have just whole bean, Emma.
I know. But you shamed me one time. You said that was, it doesn't, it's bad.
Keep.
It doesn't keep. Yeah, and now it's in my head.
Yeah, you got to disregard
a
lot of that stuff.
Yeah, don't listen to me. Go ahead.
On ESPN today, we'll be talking preseason football, giving some fantasy tips, but we'll do a full fantasy show probably next Monday in anticipation of everybody's drafts. And then we'll also talk a little WNBA. Caitlin Clark broke the rookie assist record yesterday. It's heating up in the WNBA. So youtube.com/ESPN show.
And on Left Reckoning, patreon.com/Left Reckoning, I had a conversation with Olivier Jutel about venture capitalists, including Balaji Srinivasan, who's sort of like an Andreessen Horowitz guy, who thinks that venture capitalists, as grays, he calls them, need to clear the streets of blues, which he calls progressives, and team up with the reds, which are conservatives. So a very normal guy, patreon.com/Left Reckoning. I just want to say, Richard Slotkin is one of my favorite authors. It's really great having him on today. People should check out either Gunfighter Nation, The Fatal Environment, or Regeneration Through Violence. His 3 early trilogy books if they want to look into the history of American culture, because I think he covers it as good as anybody.
Definitely.
Woodrow from Chicago land on the IM. Hey, I'm our crew. Absolutely goddamn fascinating interview with Richard Slotkin. Great job, like always. Yeah, we thought that would be interesting to sort of understand. I mean, at the end of the day, the conventions are basically productions. And had I known that Harris was going to be the nominee, I think we probably 6 months ago would have started to try and figure out a way of going there, at least in part. The coverage, from my estimation, gives you the best sense of like what the electoral salience will be of the convention when you're watching it on TV, because it's a TV show that is meant to basically convince a specific set of people, and to set these type of narratives, as we were talking about with Slotkin, and to sort of, do they tie into national myths that will allow the narratives they're trying to build to have more sort of like salience and carry and reach.
Yeah. The
interesting thing about going to the convention is just that you have the ability to get interviews with people you wouldn't normally see. You know, and I last time I was at a convention, I guess, was in 2016, and interviewing the number 2 at a teachers union. You get it. These are not people who are usually out and about and looking to do an interview, and it's sort of like a random thing to do, on a given Monday, maybe. But when you're there, you could just you bank a lot of these interviews, and we just didn't do that. But we're going to cover it from the perspective of like, how is it going to be received and what's it going to do to our politics?
Yeah.
But we'll
get to that. I wasn't entirely sure about this, so I didn't bring it up in our interview with Richard, but yet that she's using that song Freedom by Beyonce, which I guess was written, or at least it was used in the Black Lives Matter demonstration. So she's saying the freedom thing, and her walkout song is that Beyonce song that has some association with that. So I think that he's right, that's an attempt at evoking that kind of activism, right? So we'll see.
But also, I mean, the key is, and Slotkin has this in his book. He thinks the most effective thing is marrying both that the civil rights emancipation movement and the New Deal movement. In freedom, because you can say freedom in the context of emancipation for people, then you could also say freedom from medical debt, freedom from college debt, freedom from concern about health. Right.
Walz has been doing that, right? Walz has been effective, I think, at marrying those. So.
All right. Well, we're going to head into the fun half where we will talk about this and, of course, the huge trend out there. And you may want to get in on this. And it turns out to be carrying little containers to MAGA rallies that purports to have some of J.D. Vance's semen in it. And we're going to talk about how much fun that is and how not weird that is in the fun half.
Is that a rat F? Like, all right, we'll talk about it there. But
It's real.
I know it's real, but like, is this like a dirty trick by some Democrat going in there and posing and saying?
You know, it'd be funny, guys, if we
like it stretches credulity.
Let's have this conversation in the fun half.
Okay,
right now.
okay.
Why are we giving this away for free? This is
right.
high level ideas, and we'll be right back after this.
You are in for it.
All right, folks, 646-257-3920. See you in the fun.
Are you ready?
Who sent us this?
Anarchy. Alpha males are back. Boy is back. And the alpha males are back.
Just as delicious as you could imagine.
The alpha males are back. Boy is back. And the alpha males are back.
Just wanna degrade the white man.
Alpha males are back.
I take all of it to my throat.
Alpha males are back.
Snowflake says what?
The alpha males are back.
You are a madman.
And the alpha males are back.
Oh no, Sam Seder! What a fucking nightmare! Bring back DJ Dinner.
Yeah, or a couple of them. Just put them in rotation.
DJ Dinner.
Well, the problem with those is they're like 45 seconds long.